Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Jill Vitale-Aussem, who is with the Eden Alternative. Welcome to the program, Jill.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Hey, so give us a little bit of background on yourself and then what led you to the Eden Alternative.
Sure. So I have been working in the field of aging services or senior living for about 2 decades. I started out as a nursing home administrator back in the mid-90s and have been an administrator, have run assisted living communities, continuing care retirement communities. And probably about 10 years ago, I was introduced to the Eden Alternative as a means to start working on the institutional culture of the nursing home where I was working. But when I say institutional culture, what I really mean by that is, culture that's very focused on the medical needs of the people that live in the community and is really focused on efficiency and really the staff being in charge and really the residents, even though getting good care, not having a lot of control over their own lives, everything from what time they get up in the morning to how they live their day, and definitely not having an impact on the organization that they're living in. And the same thing holds true for the staff in an institutional setting. There's not a lot of empowerment that happens. And so I was introduced to the Eden Alternative, the education as a means to start to drive that change. And I implemented it in a couple of different communities and really saw the incredible impact that we had, and started doing volunteer work with the Eden Alternative and became an educator. And then when the CEO position became available a little over a year ago, it was just a perfect fit for me.
It's interesting you give that timeline because so many people that I interview that are really change makers in a specific industry, and it doesn't matter what type of industry, but so many times if someone has experienced that transformation, they're drawn toward that. And you just described it perfectly there. I've talked to some people that said, as a kid, I was in an accident and we went and visited this new thing called a chiropractor, and it just changed my life, and went to chiropractic school, and now I'm changing other people's lives. So I love hearing how you introduce that concept from personal experience. You didn't just take a job and go, now what do I do? You are coming at it with that passion and enthusiasm because you've seen it in action.
Yes, and I think every older person deserves to live in an environment like that. That's why I do what I do.
Well, now let's dive a little bit more into what the Eden Alternative is and how you help organizations, because I think you touched on it. And from what I perceived there, and I want you to go deeper because I want you to make sure that we're dialed in really tightly to what you do. It's not kind of like this institutional check the box every day. Okay, we did this and this and this and this next. It's more of how can we really go deeper and make this a vibrant community?
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the misconceptions that people have about driving this kind of change, that it's like a program that you bring in, like you said, right? There's a start and a finish, and you check these boxes and you're done. This is adaptive work that we're talking about. That is, it goes really deep. It's really about organizational transformation. And so what we do, so we've been around for 25 years, and we're a not-for-profit. And we are, in 2018, we were active in 16 different countries around the world. And so what we do is we work with nursing homes, we work with assisted living organizations, home care companies, retirement communities, organizations that support people of all ages with different abilities. This approach works everywhere. And we provide education, and because that's the basis of everything, right, is people have to personally change the way that they think and behave in order to really transform an organization. So education, we do a lot of leadership training, because if leadership doesn't change, nothing changes in the organization, right? You have to really become an empowering leader and adapt some different styles. We do a lot of education about dementia and how to better support people living with dementia. And then we do a lot of consulting work and help, because I mean, this stuff is hard. It's hard to make sure it's sustainable because it's not, like you said, checking off a box. So we do a lot of consulting work with organizations to make sure that they're set up to be successful for change, and we support them as they move through that change process as well. And there are some organizations that do it on their own, and we provide the tools and the framework for that, which is great. Education, we've got an Eden Alternative Registry where organizations that are really committed to the change sign up to be a part of that, as kind of an honor society for the ones that are really committed to driving that deep change.
So when you're talking about helping leaders to make the change, because it has to start top down, and you also have to go bottom up, because if the leaders are saying to change and the staff is not on board with the vision and mission and change, then it's not going to work. So it's got to be top to bottom, bottom to top. Got it. Love that.
Absolutely.
Here's something that I wonder about. Normally, you would say, "Oh, what are the advantages you provide to organizations?" Because that sounds like a really fun thing to say. Well, we provide and we help. But what I think that is the underlying question is, as with marketing or really human nature, kind of the push and the pull. If you push someone to do something, they resist. So what are the advantages to this organization so that when they're understood, the leadership and the staff are drawn toward achieving that, and they feel like, I want to do that because I'm going toward this outcome?
Right. And so there's a couple different things. For the team members that are directly supporting residents, for them, it's bringing them back to why they got into this work, right? Which is, I want to help people. I want to support people. It brings people back to their purpose in their job. It helps them to become better at their job. It helps that they become empowered, so they have that autonomy to do their job the right way. And so people get unbelievably excited by this. Like, people go through our training and say, this is life-changing. Yeah. For the formal leaders get excited too. And they're also worried about organizational outcomes. So, the things that we see happening with organizational improvements are people want to work in a community like this, in an organization like this. And so we see team member retention improve, which is a huge issue right now. There's quite a workforce challenge going on, so that's a big thing. Occupancy in a community gets better because people want to live in a place like that. We just had some research done where homes that are engaged with our registry perform better on the federal government, the CMS nursing home ratings. Their surveys, their inspections are better, and their overall ratings are better, and they have significantly lower numbers of substantiated complaints. That's when a resident or family member would call into the health department, and then the health department has to come out and do an inspection. And so significantly lower numbers of complaints because that culture is better. Yeah. And people feel heard, and everybody's working together to make it a better place. So, and financial outcomes. So there's incredible organizational outcomes that come with this as well.
And you mentioned retention, which is huge in any line of work, but I also would wonder, and I'm confident that referrals and word of mouth really escalates because, that your residents become your best marketing mouthpiece. Yes,
absolutely. Absolutely. At my community where I was doing this work, we had a huge improvement in occupancy and ended up with a waiting list of people that wanted to move in there. Yeah. That's everything. You can advertise all you want, but it's really when people are excited to be there, and the residents help to market the place too. Yep. Right? Somebody comes in to see the community, you're doing a tour, and the people that live there are the ones saying, you need to live here because it's amazing. Yep,
exactly. Hey, so I know you just finished writing a book called Disrupting the Status Quo of Senior Living. And I think there's an interesting point that you bring up, which is that the hospitality model in long-term care can be detrimental to residents. What is that all about?
Well, so, and I should point out, my master's degree is in hotel administration. And so I spent a lot of the beginning of my career coming at this from a hospitality model. So there's been a huge learning opportunity for me along the way. But what I've come to realize is there are so many so much of what we're trying to do in this field is as a way to get away from this institutional framework is to, okay, let's be like a hotel. Let's be like a resort. Let's create this place. And there's actually a lot of advertising that says carefree lifestyle and come here and put your feet up and have everything done for you. And we sell the amenities and all those things, which can be great. And also the hospitality model, I have come to believe, is really not terribly in alignment with what we know about how people age well and what people need to be well, right? So people need purpose. There's tons of research that shows that people need to have a reason to get up in the morning. The research that's been done on the different places where people age long and age well, they find that people have a role to play. They might still be out working in the garden. They're still doing things for themselves. They're maintaining their natural, the physical strength that comes from doing everyday things. So
the old cliche about retiring, I'm going to retire and kick back and play golf and fish. Well, after about 2-3 weeks or 2-3 months of that, now what? So the kick your feet back and relax. That sounds good, but in reality, maybe the research supports that you start just dwindling away because of that purpose and you're not part of a community. And I think that's just a huge, huge observation. That kicking your feet up is a nice perk and a nice icing on the cake, but I think that needs to be like and also you'll have this aspect, but we bring purpose and we allow our residents to be part of.
Not just allow it, but promote it, right? It's that culture where people have purpose, where there's a real community feeling, because we also need to be part of a community, right? Isolation is as deadly as smoking. And obesity.
So what do you do to promote that rather than just say, we don't just have you kick your feet up, we give you purpose, and then have that just be part of your slogan? Well, what are some of the things that you help to facilitate and encourage that?
So there's some really amazingly simple things to do, but it takes a while because it freaks people out at first. So one of the things that we started doing is, rather than when people would come to see the community and us going through this whole litany of here are all of our amenities, here's what we can do for you, is we started asking questions like, what's your passion? What do you think you can bring to this community to make it a stronger place and a more vibrant place? And at first, people are like, well, nobody asked me that.
I don't know.
I'm old. Nobody expects that of me. But then we really saw, people get excited about it, about making the community a better place. And we stopped, just asking about who people were in the past and started saying, what do you want to learn next? Right? So, because there's that whole thing, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We can learn at every age. And so even the questions we ask people really starts to drive that change.
Sure.
And we also started really focusing on community building and not treating people like consumers, but like citizens. Like, we're all in this together. How are we going to resolve this issue that we're having? Let's come together and figure this out. And then people have ownership of it in the success of the solution.
So we've talked about, moving away from institutional kind of culture care and moving toward the empowerment purpose. I would suspect that the first time an administrator or a CEO of a facility were hearing this, there's some resistance. So what kind of resistance and common fears are you finding the people are having?
I think sometimes people think, well, to do this, we need more staff. Which is absolutely not true. I think that it's big, right? And so what I see happening so much, and what I used to do before I really started to understand this, is you want to go for programmatic or program things I can check off the box, right? Technical fixes. So if I bring in this new technology, that will fix it. If I have the nursing staff stop wearing scrubs for their uniforms, it'll feel more like home. So I think people get really confused by
the tactics.
Right? It's not about tactics. And the other thing is, I think people are afraid because you can become, and this was what happened with me, is I was very competent as an institutional administrator. And so to drive this new change, I had to give up all the things that I knew and that I was really good at and start to look at things differently. So there's this whole thing you have to go through of acknowledging that maybe the way I've been doing things isn't the way I should be doing things. And that can be really hard.
What do you do to pull them past that layer of fear? Because I think that could be really hard is a great point, but then what?
Well, I think it's really about working with organizations to, and this sounds really silly, but I wrote about this in my book, is to get past this place where we think incompetence is this terrible thing and say, you know what, we're going to be incompetent for a little while. We're going to make mistakes, and start to be an organization that doesn't look at making a mistake as, oh, well, you screwed this up, but it's, hey, we learned something from this, and a mistake means we're trying something new. And so really getting in this place where you can start to celebrate that time of, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and know that it's that you have to have that. You don't have growth if you're not uncomfortable. And the only way, personally, as a leader, you can grow and that an organization can grow is go through times of uncertainty. And so I think it's celebrating those things and really becoming comfortable with that and knowing that it's a good thing.
Yeah. It's kind of like rewarding someone for positive behavior rather than chastising them for negative. So you're kind of drawing them and pulling them. Yeah, good point.
Absolutely.
Hey, so what do you find some other obstacles are for organizations to seek out help from a firm like Eden Alternative? And then can you think of an example of maybe sometime that you've worked with someone that you help them overcome some of these things and work past those fears we were just talking about?
Yeah, I think some of the other obstacles are organizations will think, again, it's wanting to go to this easy fix. And this might not seem easy, but a technical fix that I see a lot of organizations doing is they'll take this old infrastructure, this old building, and they'll build a new building, right? So they'll create a prettier building, they'll create a different dining space, and something that looks like home. So they'll spend all this money on millions of dollars on a new building or a renovation of a building, but they don't put the money into working on the operational culture and how are we going to actually have this function differently. So you go in and it's like, wow, this is a really pretty institution, but nothing has changed. So it's almost like, if you were to buy a new computer, but then put old software in it. Right, everything is going to fall apart. And so I think sometimes it's that thinking that a new building or a physical change is going to change things. And what we see is when organizations work with us on helping them before this all happens, like you should be spending as much time planning and working on your culture and working on how do you operationalize that culture as you do building the building, even longer actually. So what we see when organizations do that is they have things work, and you actually end up with less frustration, and people don't have to go back then and spend a bunch of money to have people come in and fix things because they're doing it right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. Hey, what do you think when some organization is thinking about, this sounds good, I love this concept of transition and transformation. What is some of the most important things that they should think about and consider when they're thinking about making the transition or even looking towards someone to help guide them?
I think the most important thing is to ensure that the top leadership of the organization gets it, has a vision, and is on board. That means the board of directors in a not-for-profit or the corporate office or the owners or whoever it is, and that they understand their role in it. Because what we see happen is every time that an organization is on this road, they're doing awesome things. When it fails, when they go off the rails, is when there's a leadership change and a new person comes in and doesn't get it. Or leadership isn't committed and it gets hard. Things get hard and they give up.
Yeah.
And then we have, people calling us saying, can you help us? Everything's, gone away. And so leadership has to understand and be 100% committed to it and really understand, I think, as an organization, what do we need to drive this change? And we've got something that's called the path to mastery, and there's different milestones. Mm-hmm. And so it's help organizations understand you don't just jump right from where you are to the, changing your dining or whatever it might be, or, trying to empower team members. You have to make sure your leadership team's ready. Right. And so that foundation for change, making sure the organization is ready for that is critical. And we find that the organizations that work with us on that, where we come in and we a lot of times we'll go in 5 times over a year, spend a day with them every other month. They have things that they do in the meantime. We help them with accountability to make sure they're working through that process, that those organizations that do that have a much faster implementation rate, and it's more sustainable.
Yeah, you ask a question like that, and then the answer is just so obvious, but it had to be spoken about, because not only does the leadership need to be aware and bought in, but they need to be bought in for the long term, because like you said, it could be like a shiny object, like, oh, that's cool for this quarter, and then next quarter we know the boss is going to lose its luster, and it's just going to go back to normal. You got to keep on and keep on and keep on.
Yep, absolutely.
Hey, so in your book, you talk about sense of community is essential to well-being. Let's talk a little bit more about that sense of community as being, really that foundational truth to making the change. And I would even add into that, wouldn't that sense of community with the residents be a spark to then re-encourage the leadership when they see that? Because now the leadership goes, hey, this is working, and I want to keep on keeping on, because they see the sense of community.
Yes, absolutely. And so we have to have community, right? Isolation, as we were talking about, is deadly to people. And sometimes people think, well, if I move into a community, I'll be around other people, so I won't feel isolated. And what actually happens is that's not always true. And there's actually been research that's been done where people move into these communities, and a significant number of them are still isolated. Yeah. And so, I think, again, it goes back to people not feeling like they are a citizen of a community, right? I'm a consumer here. And we don't talk about what does it mean to accept other people. There's a lot of, if you've heard the term ageism, people, how we think about people who are older than us, and then there's ableism, which is about how we think about and treat people who are living with different abilities, like people who are living with frailty, in a wheelchair, with a walker, living with dementia. And we a lot of times in these communities, we don't address those things. Sure. And so people get really uncomfortable. There's a definition of ageism, that it's prejudice against our feared future self. Huh. And so when we're getting older and we're afraid of having dementia, we're afraid of having frailty, people can start to push aside other people. And we are part of that because we segregate people who are living with dementia or who live in a nursing home. And so it's really working with the community and the people that live there to develop new norms of acceptance. And that's not the administrator or the executive director writing a new policy. It's sitting down and talking about, how do we want to treat each other here? How do we want to make sure people aren't isolated? How do we want to make sure people have a sense of belonging? And it really starts to make things change and make things different. And after time with the leader kind of driving the conversation, the people that live there keep that going. And they're the ones that are keeping those norms going and teaching the new people moving in about, this is how we do things here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, so getting back to your book, Disrupting the Status Quo of Senior Living, I love the concept of the title, because in business, everyone wants to be that disruptor in a positive way, and the status quo is, like same old, same old. So I love how that is positioning your deliverable, which is all of the things we're talking about. What's the one thing you hope that readers will take away from the book?
That in order to really change things, well, and here's something that I think people need to think about a little bit, is, right now, statistics show that only about maybe 10 to 12% of people who could move into a senior living community do. And some of that's financial, but there are a lot of people, there's all this research with baby boomers. The vast majority of people are like, I'm staying in my home until the day I die. I do not want to go to one of these places.
Yeah.
And, and so some people can age really well in their homes, but a lot of people end up isolated. They're living in homes that aren't designed to support them if they, end up living with frailty or whatever it is, but they'll hold on to those homes and stay in a situation where they might not be doing well. And it's not because they're afraid that we don't have, our dining isn't as good as it should be, or that we don't have a putting green out in the, on the property of the senior living community or whatever it is. People are afraid of losing their independence. They're afraid of not belonging. They're afraid of losing, the perception, I no longer have relevance anymore, and you're putting me away in this place. And the only way to address that, I believe, is to change the culture, to start thinking about what we're doing in a different way, and to create cultures where, people come in, you still have a purpose. It's this vibrant place. You have community. You continue to grow, and you continue to learn. So I think for me, that's the big thing is we've got to start changing the way we think about aging.
Yep. One person at a time and one organization at a time. That's awesome. Hey, so let's wrap up with how can people find out more about the Eden Alternative and also pick up a copy of your brand new book?
Sure. So the Eden Alternative website is www.edenalt.org. And my book's available on Amazon, and it's available through the publisher. I would encourage people to go to our Eden Alternative website to get it, because if they do that, they're also supporting the mission for our work that we're doing.
That is awesome. Well, Jill, I really do love the work you're doing. It's just great to see when people are helping make transformations and not just checking off the box. So thank you so much for your time today and coming on to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.